The moment people sense uncertainty in you, something changes in their behavior. Their tone sharpens, their confidence expands, they interrupt more, question more, push harder. Not because they are truly powerful, but because pressure feeds on reaction. Most intimidation has very little to do with strength. It comes from the hope that emotion will pull you away from yourself, and the unsettling truth is that it often works. People rush to defend themselves. They explain too much. They try to regain control emotionally, while the other person quietly takes control psychologically. Stoicism understood something timeless about human nature. A person who cannot govern their emotions will eventually be governed by the emotions of others. That is why calmness carries such quiet power. It interrupts manipulation. It exposes insecurity beneath aggression. The person who remains composed under pressure becomes difficult to control because their identity no longer depends on approval, fear, or emotional victory. And once someone reaches that state, intimidation begins collapsing on its own. Pressure loses momentum when it finds nothing unstable to hold on to. Most people think strength is loud. The Stoics believed the opposite. Real strength is often invisible at first. It appears in the pause before reaction, in the ability to stay grounded while someone else loses control of themselves. Not cold, not emotionless, just steady enough that chaos cannot easily enter the mind. And when a person learns how to protect that inner steadiness, they stop fearing pressure the way they once did. The moment pressure enters a conversation, most people begin changing without realizing it. Their breathing shortens, their posture shifts, their voice tightens, thoughts start racing ahead of the moment itself. Intimidation depends on that reaction more than anything else. It depends on visible disturbance. The person applying pressure watches closely for signs that they are affecting you. A rushed explanation, nervous laughter, restless movement, excessive defending. These reactions become proof that their presence is working. That is why some people push harder the second they sense discomfort. They are not responding to truth, they are responding to movement. What makes this dangerous is how automatic it becomes. Most people do not consciously decide to surrender control of an interaction. They become desperate to remove tension as quickly as possible. Someone challenges them, and suddenly silence feels unbearable. They start speaking too quickly, trying to repair the atmosphere before they even understand what is happening inside themselves. But pressure grows stronger when it controls your tempo. The faster you react emotionally, the easier it becomes for someone else to lead the interaction wherever they want it to go. A calm person forces pressure to slow down, and once the pace slows, clarity begins returning to the room. This is why composure unsettles aggressive personalities more than resistance often does. Aggression expects collision. It expects emotional movement in return, raised voices, defensive energy, visible frustration. When none of that appears, something shifts beneath the surface. The person trying to dominate slowly loses certainty. Their emotional momentum suddenly has nowhere to land. It is like throwing force against a wall that refuses to move. Eventually, the person pushing becomes aware of their own behavior, and self-awareness changes people quickly. Many individuals appear powerful only as long as others react automatically around them. The Stoics understood that emotional discipline begins long before words leave the mouth. They believed freedom exists inside the pause between stimulus and response. Most people lose access to that pause under pressure. Emotion rushes forward before thought can settle. But when you train yourself to remain still internally for even a few seconds longer, you interrupt the entire pattern. You stop becoming predictable. That unpredictability becomes strength. Intimidation depends heavily on expectation. The other person expects quick emotion. They expect visible discomfort. They expect your identity to become unstable under pressure. Calmness quietly breaks those expectations all at once. There is another reason silence becomes so powerful in tense moments. Silence forces people to sit with themselves. Most intimidation is performative at its core. The louder voice, the sharper tone, the invasive posture. These behaviors are designed to create emotional urgency inside another person, but performances need engagement to survive. The moment emotional engagement disappears, the performer becomes aware of the performance itself. That awareness often creates discomfort faster than confrontation would. A person who remains composed without becoming passive creates a strange kind of mirror. The aggressor begins seeing themselves more clearly. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionally distant. Many people misunderstand composure and turn it into suppression. Real steadiness feels natural, not forced. It is not about pretending pressure has no effect on you. It is about refusing to let it control your behavior. Even calm people feel tension. The difference is that they do not obey it immediately. They let the emotion pass through observation before turning it into action. That small delay changes everything because it keeps the mind connected to choice instead of impulse. People who intimidate others often depend on emotional speed. They create urgency because urgency weakens reflection. Think about how often pressure sounds rushed. Someone demands answers immediately, interrupts constantly, or pushes conversations toward emotional extremes before clarity has time to form. Slowing down internally becomes an act of quiet resistance against that pressure. Not dramatic resistance, just enough stillness to prevent someone else from deciding who you become in the moment. And the more grounded your presence remains, the more obvious the other person's instability becomes without you needing to expose it directly. Over time, this changes the way you experience conflict completely. You stop seeing intimidation as proof of another person's power and begin recognizing it as information about their emotional state. Truly centered people rarely need to force reactions from others. They do not need domination to feel stable. Pressure often comes from inner imbalance searching for control. Recognizing that truth makes intimidation feel less personal. And once fear stops shaping your reactions, your presence begins carrying a different weight entirely. That shift is subtle at first. You notice yourself listening more carefully instead of preparing emotional defenses before the other person even finishes speaking. Your body stops rushing toward escape. Your mind stops treating every difficult interaction like a threat to who you are. There is a steadiness that begins forming beneath the surface, and people can feel it even when you say very little. Some will respect it immediately. Others will challenge it because calmness reminds them of the control they lack within themselves. Stay grounded anyway. The goal is not to overpower anyone. It is to remain connected to your own center while pressure tries pulling you away from it. A person who can do that consistently becomes very difficult to manipulate because their reactions no longer belong to the room around them during moments of emotional tension. Intimidation begins losing its power the moment it is examined closely. That is why aggressive people often rely on emotional intensity instead of clarity. They speak in absolutes, throw accusations without detail, and push conversations into emotional territory before reflection has time to settle. The goal is rarely understanding. The goal is disruption. Once someone becomes emotionally overwhelmed, their thinking narrows. They stop analyzing what is actually being said and start reacting to the feeling created by the delivery. A sharp tone suddenly sounds like truth. Confidence starts sounding like truth. And broad claims gain influence simply because they arrive with force behind them. Most people do not notice how quickly they abandon observation during tense moments. Someone says, "You never handle pressure well," and the mind instantly moves toward defense. The emotional reaction arrives before the reasoning process even begins. That is where intimidation gains its advantage, not through logic, but through speed. Pressure tries to bypass reflection completely. It wants emotion to become immediate and automatic. But the second you slow the interaction down internally, something important changes. You stop absorbing statements emotionally and start observing them clearly. That small shift creates distance between you and the emotional atmosphere surrounding the conversation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that external events do not control the mind unless the mind grants them permission through judgment. That principle becomes extremely practical under pressure. When someone speaks aggressively, the instinct is to experience their certainty as proof that they are correct. But certainty is often emotional performance, not truth. Calm observation separates those two things. Instead of becoming emotionally entangled in the delivery, you begin examining the structure underneath it. What exactly is being claimed here? What evidence supports it? Which part is fact and which part is exaggeration? The more clearly you observe, the weaker emotional fog becomes. This is why calm questions can completely change the direction of an interaction without becoming confrontational. A person says, "You always ruin situations like this," expecting emotional resistance in return. Most people either collapse inward or fight back immediately, but a calm response interrupts the pattern entirely. Always. Which situation are you referring to specifically? What exactly do you believe went wrong? Suddenly the conversation must move away from emotional force and toward explanation. That transition matters because aggression survives most easily inside vagueness. The moment specifics become necessary, exaggeration starts losing stability. There is something psychologically revealing about forcing pressure to become precise. Many people who rely on intimidation are accustomed to emotional momentum carrying them through interactions. They expect others to become reactive before clarity enters the conversation. But calm inquiry removes that momentum piece by piece. Once someone is required to explain themselves carefully, they often begin slowing down without realizing it. Their language becomes less certain. Their emotional rhythm changes. Small contradictions appear between what they originally claimed and what they can actually support. As Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." And the moment certainty is forced into examination, emotional performance begins losing its grip. None of this requires aggression from you. It only requires patience strong enough to remain observant while someone else becomes emotional. Patience is difficult because the mind naturally wants relief from tension. Silence can feel uncomfortable when pressure fills the room. That discomfort pushes people toward quick reactions, even when those reactions weaken their position. But there is strength in remaining mentally seated while another person rushes emotionally around you. Calm observation keeps your attention connected to reality instead of emotional distortion. It prevents you from treating every accusation like a threat to your identity. And when identity stops becoming entangled with every difficult interaction, emotional stability deepens naturally. Over time, this changes the way pressure feels entirely. You begin recognizing that emotional intensity alone means very little. Loudness is not authority, aggression is not wisdom, and confidence without clarity often hides insecurity beneath it. The more carefully you observe human behavior, the more obvious this becomes. Many people speak forcefully because they fear losing control of the interaction. Others rely on intimidation because they mistake emotional dominance for strength. But truly grounded people rarely need to overpower conversations. Their steadiness carries influence naturally. If these ideas resonate with something deeper in you, consider subscribing and continuing this path with us. Not for empty motivation or temporary confidence, but for the discipline of building a steadier mind in a world that constantly tries to disturb it. That principle becomes extremely practical during moments of pressure. When someone speaks aggressively, the instinct is to experience their certainty as proof that they are correct. But certainty is often emotional performance, not truth. Calm observation separates those two things. Instead of becoming emotionally entangled in the delivery, you begin examining the structure underneath it. What exactly is being claimed here? What evidence supports it? Which part is fact and which part is exaggeration? The more clearly you observe, the weaker emotional fog becomes. This is why calm questions can completely change the direction of an interaction without becoming confrontational. A person says, "You always ruin situations like this," expecting emotional resistance in return. Most people either collapse inward or fight back immediately, but a calm response interrupts the pattern entirely. Always. Which situation are you referring to specifically? What exactly do you believe went wrong? Suddenly, the conversation must move away from emotional force and toward explanation. That transition matters because aggression survives most easily inside vagueness. The moment specifics become necessary, exaggeration starts losing stability. There is something psychologically revealing about forcing pressure to become precise. Many people who rely on intimidation are accustomed to emotional momentum carrying them through interactions. They expect others to become reactive before clarity enters the conversation. But calm inquiry removes that momentum piece by piece. Once someone is required to explain themselves carefully, they often begin slowing down without realizing it. Their language becomes less certain, their emotional rhythm changes. Small contradictions appear between what they originally claimed and what they can actually support. None of this requires aggression from you. It only requires patience strong enough to remain observant while someone else becomes emotional. Patience is difficult because the mind naturally wants relief from tension. Silence can feel uncomfortable when pressure fills the room. That discomfort pushes people toward quick reactions, even when those reactions weaken their position. But there is strength in remaining mentally seated while another person rushes emotionally around you. Calm observation keeps your attention connected to reality instead of emotional distortion. It prevents you from treating every accusation like a threat to your identity. And when identity stops becoming entangled with every difficult interaction, your emotional stability deepens naturally. People often assume intimidation is defeated through dominance. In reality, dominance frequently feeds the cycle further. Emotional escalation creates more noise, more reaction, and less clarity. A composed mind does something different. It filters before responding. It examines before concluding. This does not mean becoming passive or avoiding boundaries. It means refusing to surrender awareness in moments designed to overwhelm it. Once awareness remains intact, emotional manipulation becomes much harder to sustain because manipulation depends heavily on unexamined emotion. Over time, this changes the way pressure feels entirely. You begin recognizing that emotional intensity alone means very little. Loudness is not authority, aggression is not wisdom, and confidence without clarity often hides insecurity beneath it. The more carefully you observe human behavior, the more obvious this becomes. Many people speak forcefully because they fear losing control of the interaction. Others rely on intimidation because they mistake emotional dominance for strength. But truly grounded people rarely need to overpower conversations. Their steadiness carries influence naturally. As Seneca wrote, "The greatest power is often simple patience." And patience reveals more about a person than pressure ever will. Clarity changes the atmosphere of every interaction because it keeps your mind anchored while someone else drifts into emotion. The person who stays attentive instead of reactive controls the pace. That control does not come from force. It comes from presence, and presence becomes difficult to disturb once you stop treating pressure like proof you are wrong. Calm examination reveals that many intimidating people are struggling harder than they appear. Pressure changes people faster than they realize. The moment tension enters a conversation, the body begins preparing for danger before the mind fully understands what is happening. Breathing shortens, speech accelerates, small movements become restless and uncontrolled. Even intelligent people suddenly lose clarity because urgency takes control of their rhythm. That is why intimidation often feels overwhelming in the moment. It pushes the nervous system into speed, and once speed takes over, judgment weakens. People begin reacting before thinking. They interrupt themselves. They explain too much. They chase emotional relief instead of remaining connected to awareness. The person creating pressure depends on this acceleration because emotional speed makes human behavior predictable. Watch how quickly conversations change when someone introduces tension deliberately. A sharp tone enters the room and suddenly everyone begins rushing. The atmosphere becomes emotionally crowded. People stop listening carefully and start preparing defenses while the other person is still speaking. This is where many interactions are lost long before any real understanding becomes possible. The pressure itself is often less damaging than the pace it creates. Fast emotions narrow perception. They make temporary feelings appear permanent and emotional intensity appear meaningful. But intensity is not wisdom. A loud voice can still be unstable. An aggressive personality can still be uncertain beneath the surface. Slowing yourself internally helps you see that more clearly. The Stoics understood something modern life constantly pulls people away from. Inner steadiness is not built during peaceful moments alone. It is tested during emotional friction. Anyone can appear composed when nothing challenges them. The real discipline begins when pressure enters unexpectedly and tries to pull the mind into confusion. That is why rhythm matters so much. Emotional control is deeply connected to pace. When the body speeds up, thoughts often follow. When thoughts become frantic, emotions rise further. Then reactions begin multiplying without reflection. But when your breathing slows intentionally, your awareness starts returning. Your thoughts gain structure again. The mind becomes less vulnerable to emotional contagion. There is a reason calm people often appear more powerful without speaking much. Stability communicates something words cannot fully imitate. A person who moves slowly during tension signals that their emotional state remains under their own authority. They do not appear trapped inside the emotional weather of the room. Their gestures stay controlled. Their posture remains grounded. Even silence begins carrying weight around them because nothing about their presence suggests panic. This creates a strong psychological contrast. Fast emotional energy starts looking scattered beside someone who remains centered. And once people notice that contrast, the emotional balance of the interaction begins shifting naturally. Many individuals mistake speed for confidence because modern culture rewards quick reactions constantly. Fast answers are praised. Immediate opinions are celebrated. Emotional intensity is often mistaken for authenticity. But wisdom rarely moves at that pace. Thoughtful people allow moments to settle before responding because they understand that reactions created too quickly are usually shaped by emotion rather than understanding. There is strength in remaining unhurried while others become impulsive around you. Not passive, not detached. Simply deliberate enough that your mind stays connected to reality instead of emotional momentum. People who rely on intimidation often become uncomfortable around calm pacing because composure quietly interrupts their control over the interaction. They expect emotional immediacy. They expect visible tension. They expect your nervous system to mirror theirs. But when your tempo remains steady, they begin feeling the weight of their own urgency more clearly. Their interruptions start appearing excessive. Their emotional intensity becomes more obvious. Sometimes they even slow themselves down unconsciously because human beings naturally respond to the rhythm surrounding them. Calmness influences environments more than most people realize. This does not mean becoming artificially slow or trying to appear wise through exaggerated stillness. Forced calmness feels performative very quickly. Real composure feels natural because it comes from internal clarity rather than image management. The goal is not to look emotionally unaffected. The goal is to remain connected to yourself while emotion moves through the situation. You can still feel pressure without becoming controlled by it. You can still experience discomfort without obeying it immediately. As Carl Jung observed, Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That distinction changes the way conflict feels over time. Eventually, you begin noticing something important. Many intimidating people are deeply dependent on urgency because urgency prevents careful observation. The faster everything moves, the harder it becomes for others to recognize inconsistency, insecurity, or emotional instability beneath aggressive behavior. But calm pacing exposes those things gradually without confrontation. Once you stop rushing emotionally, you begin seeing people more accurately. And once you see clearly, intimidation loses much of the illusion that gave it strength in the first place. That is why the strongest presence in difficult moments is usually the person who refuses to surrender their rhythm. They listen fully. They speak carefully. They allow silence to exist without fearing it. While others chase control through emotional force, they remain grounded enough to choose their response instead of becoming trapped inside reaction. And that freedom strengthens them. This matters more than most people understand because physical reactions teach the nervous system how to interpret future situations. Every unconscious retreat becomes information stored inside the body. Pressure enters, and the body learns to yield. Over time, that pattern becomes automatic. The person is no longer choosing their response consciously. Their nervous system begins reacting before reflection can intervene. That is why intimidation becomes so deeply rooted for some individuals. It is not only emotional, it becomes physical memory. The body remembers situations where tension led to discomfort, and it starts trying to avoid that discomfort immediately whenever similar energy appears again. The Stoics understood the relationship between physical presence and emotional state with surprising depth. They believed the body and mind constantly shape one another. A restless posture strengthens inner instability. A grounded posture strengthens inner steadiness. Neither exists separately for very long. This is why composure cannot exist only as a mental idea. It must become physical as well. The way you breathe during pressure matters. The way you stand matters. Even the way you hold silence matters because the body communicates emotional information constantly, whether you intend it to or not. Presence itself carries influence in ways words often cannot. Some individuals walk into tense environments and calm the atmosphere simply because nothing about them appears internally chaotic. Others create tension even before speaking because their body radiates emotional instability beneath controlled language. Human beings are constantly reading one another physically, often without conscious awareness. That is why people can sense insecurity, desperation, fear, or steadiness before any conversation fully begins. The body reveals emotional truth faster than speech usually does. Notice how intimidation frequently depends on spatial pressure. Someone stands too close intentionally. Someone leans forward while speaking to force psychological retreat. Someone interrupts your physical rhythm repeatedly to establish control over the interaction. These behaviors seem small in isolation, yet they affect people deeply because the nervous system interprets physical pressure quickly. Most individuals respond by unconsciously giving ground. They shift backward inch by inch while trying to avoid escalation. But every retreat subtly reinforces the idea that the other person controls the emotional territory of the interaction. This does not mean every situation requires standing your ground physically in a confrontational way. The deeper point is awareness. Once you become conscious of how pressure influences your body, you stop reacting automatically. You begin choosing instead. Sometimes remaining still for a few seconds longer changes the emotional balance entirely. Sometimes maintaining relaxed eye contact prevents another person's energy from overtaking the conversation. Sometimes simply refusing to shrink physically communicates more strength than arguing ever could. Small physical choices influence emotional dynamics constantly. One of the quietest forms of power is remaining psychologically where you are while someone else tries pulling you out of yourself. Many people abandon their center immediately under pressure because they become overly focused on managing the other person's emotions. They rush to calm the aggressor, repair the atmosphere, or reduce tension as quickly as possible. In doing so, they disconnect from their own internal stability. But grounded people do something different. They remain connected to themselves first. They listen carefully without collapsing inward emotionally. They stay physically present without becoming aggressive, and that steadiness forces the interaction into a different shape. People who rely heavily on intimidation often struggle when emotional control no longer belongs entirely to them. They expect reactions, they expect retreat, they expect visible discomfort. But when none of those patterns fully appear, they begin facing something unfamiliar: resistance without hostility, calmness without submission, presence without fear. That combination becomes difficult to overpower because it does not participate in the emotional game intimidation depends on. Eventually, this changes the way your body experiences tension itself. Pressure no longer immediately pushes you into contraction or urgency. Your breathing stays deeper. Your movements stay deliberate. Your awareness remains connected to the moment instead of racing toward escape. And when the body stops obeying fear automatically, the mind becomes clearer as well. That clarity creates a different kind of influence. Not loud, not performative, just stable enough that pressure can no longer move you as easily as it once did. Manipulative people depend heavily on emotional access. They need a doorway into your reactions because reactions create influence. The moment anger takes over, clarity begins fading quietly in the background. Thoughts become narrower, perception becomes distorted. Suddenly, the interaction is no longer about understanding what is happening. It becomes about defending identity, protecting pride, or escaping emotional discomfort as quickly as possible. This is why provocation is such a common tactic in psychologically aggressive people. They understand that emotional reactions make behavior easier to predict. Once someone becomes emotionally activated, their decisions start revolving around impulse instead of awareness. As Epictetus warned, no man is free who is not master of himself. And the moment emotion takes control of judgment, influence quietly shifts into someone else's hands. The Stoics warned constantly about this kind of vulnerability. Not because emotions themselves were bad, but because unexamined emotions place control outside the self. A person who cannot pause before reacting becomes deeply manageable under pressure. Their buttons can be studied, their insecurities can be triggered, their attention can be redirected through emotional force instead of truth. And many intelligent people fall into this pattern without realizing it, because intelligence alone does not protect anyone from emotional impulsiveness. In fact, highly intelligent individuals often become even more reactive once ego becomes involved because they are deeply attached to being perceived a certain way. This is why emotional detachment becomes so unsettling for manipulative personalities. Detachment removes the reward they expect from provocation. But emotional detachment is often misunderstood completely. It does not mean becoming numb, distant, or emotionally unavailable. It means creating enough internal space that emotion does not immediately become action. You still feel irritation. You still notice tension. The difference is that the emotion passes through observation before it reaches behavior. That pause changes everything because it restores choice. And choice interrupts automatic manipulation patterns immediately. When someone throws emotional bait into a conversation, try noticing the deeper intention beneath the words instead of focusing only on the surface delivery. Is this information or emotional pressure? Is this conversation seeking understanding or reaction? That single moment of reflection weakens manipulation because awareness prevents automatic participation. Many people react so quickly that they never realize the interaction was designed emotionally from the beginning. The aggressor says something provocative, and within seconds the entire conversation shifts into emotional survival instead of thoughtful communication. Manipulative individuals often become uncomfortable around calm attention because calm attention exposes dependency. Imagine someone insulting another person while expecting visible frustration in return. They expect anger, defense, tension, maybe even emotional collapse. Instead, they encounter steadiness, no desperate explanations, no emotional counterattack, just calm observation. Something unusual happens in those moments. The manipulative person suddenly loses emotional footing because their strategy required participation. Without participation, their emotional momentum begins collapsing under its own weight. This is why some aggressive people intensify temporarily when they stop receiving reactions. They push harder because the emotional result they expected did not arrive. They become louder, more sarcastic, more invasive. But beneath that escalation, there is often insecurity revealing itself slowly. Truly grounded people rarely need emotional control over others to feel stable. Manipulative behavior usually comes from dependency hidden beneath confidence, dependency on attention, dependency on dominance, dependency on emotional influence to maintain a sense of certainty within themselves. There is something deeply freeing about recognizing that another person's emotional state does not need to become your responsibility. Many individuals spend their lives emotionally managing everyone around them. They try calming every aggressive personality, repairing every uncomfortable interaction, and preventing every moment of tension from existing naturally. But that constant emotional management disconnects people from themselves. They become more focused on controlling external reactions than maintaining internal clarity. Detachment changes that relationship completely. You begin observing emotion without automatically carrying it. This does not make you passive. Calm detachment actually strengthens boundaries because your decisions stop being controlled by emotional urgency. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin responding deliberately. There is less need to prove yourself, less need to win every interaction emotionally, less need to defend your identity whenever someone misunderstands or challenges you. And strangely enough, that lack of desperation often creates more influence naturally because people trust steadiness more than emotional volatility. Over time, emotional discipline changes the atmosphere around you. Certain manipulative tactics stop working because they no longer find easy access into your reactions. Guilt loses power when you examine it calmly. Insults lose force when they no longer control your self-perception instantly. Pressure weakens when your emotions stop moving automatically in response to another person's behavior. And once emotional control returns fully to you, intimidating personalities begin appearing differently than they once did. Less powerful, less certain, sometimes even fragile beneath the surface. Eventually, you start noticing that many aggressive individuals are emotionally dependent on reactions in ways they never openly admit. They need visible emotional impact to feel effective. They need control to feel secure. They need dominance to avoid confronting instability within themselves. And when calm detachment removes that emotional fuel, something underneath their confidence begins unraveling quietly. Not because you attacked them, not because you overpowered them, simply because you stopped feeding the emotional dynamic they depended on to maintain control over the interaction itself. One of the hardest things to learn in tense situations is how to acknowledge another person without surrendering yourself emotionally in the process. Most people believe strength means immediate resistance. Someone pushes, so they push back. Someone speaks aggressively, so they answer with equal force. The entire interaction becomes a collision of egos trying to protect themselves through emotional opposition. And while that reaction feels powerful in the moment, it often creates more instability than control. Emotional conflict feeds itself quickly. One defensive reaction invites another. One sharp tone creates a sharper response. Soon the conversation is no longer about understanding anything. It becomes a struggle for emotional dominance disguised as communication. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that ego often hides beneath performances of courage. Many people think they are standing up for themselves, when in reality, they are only protecting their pride from discomfort. Real steadiness feels different. It does not panic when confronted by another viewpoint. It does not collapse under disagreement, but it also does not feel desperate to destroy opposing perspectives immediately. A grounded person can hear tension without becoming consumed by the need to conquer it emotionally. That ability changes the entire atmosphere of difficult conversations because emotional pressure depends heavily on resistance to maintain momentum. Many individuals misunderstand this approach at first because they associate acknowledgement with weakness. They think recognizing another person's viewpoint means surrendering authority or agreeing with everything being said. But acknowledgement and submission are completely different things. Weak people often agree because they fear tension. Strong people can acknowledge because tension does not control their identity. They do not feel emotionally threatened by the existence of another perspective. That emotional security allows them to remain calm without becoming passive. There is also something psychologically disarming about feeling heard unexpectedly. Aggressive people often prepare themselves for resistance before conversations even begin. They anticipate defensiveness, interruption, or emotional opposition. When calm acknowledgement appears instead, the emotional structure they were relying on starts weakening. Their momentum slows because the conflict they expected never fully materializes. Suddenly they must interact differently. The conversation becomes less emotional and more reflective. That shift changes the balance entirely because intimidation loses strength once emotional escalation disappears. This does not mean you avoid boundaries or refuse to defend yourself when necessary. The difference lies in how the defense is delivered. Many people over-explain themselves during conflict because they feel pressure to prove their worth emotionally. They keep talking long after clarity has already been established. They repeat arguments, justify every detail, and chase validation from someone who may not even be listening carefully. But certainty rarely behaves that way. Calm people state their position clearly and allow it to exist without excessive emotional reinforcement. There is a quiet confidence in brevity when it comes from clarity instead of avoidance. A centered person does not need endless explanations to feel secure in their judgment. They can acknowledge another viewpoint calmly and still remain connected to their own understanding. That balance becomes difficult for manipulative or aggressive individuals to control because emotional hooks stop finding easy access. The interaction no longer revolves around emotional survival. It becomes grounded in awareness instead. Many confrontations continue longer than necessary because both people become emotionally attached to winning, not understanding. Winning. The ego wants victory because victory temporarily protects identity from insecurity. But when someone no longer needs emotional triumph in every interaction, their behavior changes dramatically. They stop treating disagreement like a threat to their worth. They stop forcing conversations into unnecessary extremes. And strangely enough, this often creates more respect naturally because emotional stability is difficult to fake consistently. People trust calm certainty more than loud certainty over time. Loud certainty often feels like pressure trying to convince itself. Calm certainty feels settled. It does not need dramatic language or emotional intensity to maintain itself. That is why grounded individuals often influence rooms quietly. Their steadiness creates psychological weight without obvious force. Others begin adjusting around them because composure changes the emotional rhythm of interactions naturally. Eventually, you realize that true confidence is not built on overpowering others emotionally. It is built on remaining connected to yourself while pressure attempts to pull you away from that center. Calm acknowledgement becomes part of that discipline. You stop reacting automatically. You stop fighting every statement emotionally. And in that stillness, something important happens. Your presence becomes harder to manipulate because your emotions no longer belong to the conflict itself. One of the clearest signs of emotional self-control appears at the very end of difficult interactions. Most people focus entirely on what happens during conflict while ignoring the way conflict lingers afterward. But the ending matters deeply because endings reveal attachment. They reveal whether someone is still emotionally trapped inside the interaction or finally free from it. Many individuals lose their composure not at the beginning of tension, but near the conclusion. They stay too long. They keep explaining themselves after clarity already exists. They search for one final sentence that will make the other person understand completely. And beneath all of it is usually the same emotional need: resolution, validation, emotional victory. A centered person recognizes when an interaction no longer serves clarity. They understand that not every conversation leads toward understanding, and not every conflict deserves unlimited emotional energy. Sometimes the strongest response is not winning the argument. It is ending participation without emotional collapse. That takes discipline because the ego always wants the final word. It wants reassurance that it was right, respected, understood, or victorious. But emotional freedom begins when those needs stop controlling your behavior. As Socrates understood, strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, weak minds discuss people. And the moment ego stops demanding victory, the mind becomes far more difficult to disturb. The Stoics believed true strength appears most clearly in the ability to leave situations without carrying bitterness beyond them. That idea feels simple until tension becomes personal. Someone disrespects you, someone misjudges your intentions, someone attempts to provoke or dominate you emotionally. In those moments, the mind wants closure. It wants the interaction emotionally resolved before peace becomes possible again. But peace built on external resolution is fragile because it depends entirely on another person behaving the way you hope they will. A steadier kind of peace comes from releasing the need to emotionally complete every conflict. There is something powerful about ending an interaction calmly while remaining internally settled. No dramatic departure, no final insult disguised as honesty, no visible frustration leaking through tone or posture. Just clarity, a simple boundary, a quiet conclusion. Many people underestimate how deeply this affects the nervous system. Every time you disengage without emotional chaos, the mind learns something new. It learns that tension does not automatically require panic, submission, or prolonged suffering. That lesson slowly changes the relationship between conflict and fear. Most individuals carry interactions long after they physically end. The body leaves the room, but the mind continues replaying everything repeatedly. Different responses appear hours later. Better arguments, sharper comebacks, imagined victories. Emotional residue lingers because the nervous system never fully exited the conflict. This creates a strange kind of psychological imprisonment where another person continues influencing your internal state even after the interaction itself has ended. A calm mind recognizes this pattern early and refuses to feed it unnecessarily. Not every battle deserves emotional residence inside you. That realization changes the way you move through difficult experiences. Instead of carrying tension for hours or days, you begin allowing moments to end when they are over. You stop reopening conversations internally that no longer deserve your attention. This does not mean suppressing emotion or pretending nothing affected you. It means refusing to become psychologically attached to emotional turbulence beyond the moment itself. There is maturity in letting certain experiences pass through you without turning them into permanent emotional identities. People often confuse emotional attachment with strength because society encourages endless engagement with conflict. Social environments reward reactions. Arguments continue indefinitely. Everyone wants the last statement. Everyone wants visible dominance. But endless emotional engagement usually weakens clarity instead of strengthening it. Calm disengagement often communicates more confidence than prolonged conflict ever could, because it shows the person is no longer emotionally dependent on controlling the outcome. This becomes especially important around intimidating personalities. Some people gain influence simply because others become psychologically trapped by them after interactions end. Their words replay repeatedly. Their energy lingers. Their approval feels emotionally significant. But once you stop carrying their presence internally, their power begins fading naturally. The nervous system no longer treats them like emotional authority figures. They become simply another person expressing behavior rather than someone capable of controlling your internal world. Over time, this changes your relationship with pressure completely. Strong personalities stop feeling overwhelming because you no longer associate conflict with emotional helplessness. You realize the deeper struggle was never about defeating another person externally. It was about remaining connected to your own clarity, while emotional pressure attempted to pull you away from it. As Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that awareness creates a kind of quiet confidence difficult to imitate artificially. Eventually, you notice that calm endings influence people more deeply than emotional victories often do. A person who can leave tension without visible bitterness carries a different kind of presence. There is stability there, self-respect, internal authority that does not need performance to sustain itself. And that stability becomes freedom, because freedom begins the moment another person's behavior no longer decides whether your inner state remains peaceful or disturbed after difficult moments finally pass away. The moment you stop needing to prove yourself under pressure, something changes inside you. People can still raise their voices, challenge your space, or test your patience, but they can no longer control your inner world unless you hand it to them. And that is where real strength begins. Quiet, grounded, unshaken. If this message stayed with you, watch one of the videos on your screen right now and continue building the kind of mind that remains steady in difficult moments. Thank you for being part of Stoic Journal. Until next time, protect your peace and remain centered.